The rain started at dawn and did not stop. By noon, the gutters were overflowing. By 3, the driveway was a river of red clay. By 5 in the afternoon, I was standing in my undershirt at the edge of the road, holding a piece of oak that had been in my family for 104 years, while my daughter-in-law watched from the porch with her arms crossed and her phone in her hand. She was filming me. She wanted proof. Proof that I was senile. Proof that I was digging through trash in the rain. Proof that I was unfit to live alone in the house I was born in. She did not know that the trash she had thrown out was the lock, and the lock was about to close on her forever. My name is Harold Bennett. I am 74 years old. I live in a farmhouse on Route 9 in Mercer County, West Virginia. The house was built in 1903 by my great-grandfather, Elijah Bennett. He was a timberman. He cut the oak himself, hewed the beams, and raised the frame with 6 other men in 6 days. The roof is slate from a quarry that closed in 1952. The windows are wavy glass that makes the world outside look like a dream you're already forgetting. The floors are pine, worn soft as skin in the hallways. I have lived here my entire life. I was born in the front bedroom in 1951. My mother held me up to the window so I could see the mountains. She said, "Harold, that is your inheritance, not the house, the view." She was wrong about the house. The house was the inheritance too, but she was right about the view. It is the only thing that has not changed. I married May Carpenter in 1976. She was a school teacher from Bluefield. She had red hair and a laugh that startled birds. We had one child, Travis, born in 1979. He was a quiet boy. He liked video games when they came out. He liked cars. He did not like the farm. He did not like the woods. He said West Virginia was a place people left, not a place people stayed. He went to college in Richmond. He met Jenna there. She was from Fairfax. Her father sold condominiums. She had never seen a chicken that was not wrapped in plastic. She had never heard a silence so deep it had weight. When they married in 2005, I gave them the down payment for a house in Roanoke. I thought they would stay there. I thought they would visit. I did not think they would come back to take what was not theirs. May died in 2022. Cancer. She was 71. We had been married for 46 years. She died in the same room where I was born. I held her hand. The last thing she said was, "Don't let them sell the oak." I did not know what she meant. The oak tree? The oak floors? The oak cradle? I said, "I won't." She smiled. Then she was gone. I buried her in the family plot behind the barn, next to my parents, next to her parents, next to the stone that says Bennett and nothing else because we never needed more than a name. The cradle was in the attic. It had been there since Travis outgrew it in 1980. It was made of white oak, cut from the tree that stood behind the house until 1974, when lightning struck it and it had to be felled. My great-grandmother, Sarah Bennett, had carved her initials into the headboard. SB, 1820. She had brought it with her when she married Elijah. It had held their 6 children. It had held my grandfather. It had held my father. It had held me. It had held Travis. It was the only thing in the house older than the house itself. And it was the only thing Jenna could not stand. She arrived in March of 2024. Travis had lost his job at the car dealership in Roanoke. Jenna said they were helping me downsize. She said the house was too big for one person. She said I needed to think about my future. She said the cradle was a fire hazard. She said it was full of mold. She said it was ugly. She said no one wanted a 100-year-old crib that looked like a coffin. I told her it was not a crib. It was a cradle. And it was not 100 years old. It was 104. She laughed. She said, "Harold, it's junk." She started with the attic. She brought black trash bags. She threw out May's dresses. She threw out my tools. She threw out the quilt my mother had made in 1940. I found it in the mud the next morning. I washed it. It hung in the barn for 3 weeks. She threw out the books, the photographs, the letters. I stopped her from throwing out the cradle. I carried it down to the basement. I thought it would be safe there. I was wrong. On a Tuesday in April, I drove into Princeton to see Dr. Morley about my blood pressure. I was gone 3 hours. When I came back, the basement was empty. The cradle was gone. The boxes were gone. The old chest freezer was gone. Jenna had hired a junk removal company. She had cleared it all out while I was at the doctor. She said, "Harold, you can't live in a museum. You need space. You need air. You need to let go of the past." I walked down the basement stairs. The concrete was bare. The walls were bare. The hooks where my grandfather's tools had hung were empty. The air smelled like bleach and victory. I looked at her. She was smiling. She thought she had won. She did not know that winning requires knowing what the game is. I walked outside. It was raining. The junk truck had come at 9 in the morning. It was now 5 in the afternoon. The trash had been picked up, but the cradle was too big for the truck. They had left it on the curb. It was lying on its side in the ditch. The rain was filling it like a boat. I walked to it. I knelt in the mud. I touched the headboard. The initials, SB. The oak was dark with water. The joints were swelling. I lifted it. It was heavy, heavier than I remembered. I turned it over. The mattress was gone. Jenna had thrown it out separately, but the cradle had a bottom, a solid oak bottom, and in the center of that bottom was a seam I had never noticed. A thin line, a joint. I ran my finger along it. It moved. I pressed. It clicked. The bottom of the cradle was hollow. It had always been hollow. 104 years. 6 generations. And no one had known. Inside was a tin box. Rusted. The size of a cigar box. And a cloth pouch. I pulled them out. I opened the tin. Inside was a key. Old. Brass. Heavy. The head was shaped like an oak leaf. And a piece of paper. Folded. Yellowed. Covered in pencil. Coordinates. Latitude and longitude. And a name. Holly River. 1923. I did not understand. I opened the pouch. Inside was a photograph. A woman I did not recognize. Young. Severe. Standing in front of a tent. She held a baby. Behind her was a sign. Holly River Mining Camp. And on the back of the photograph, in faded ink, Sarah, the last. Save him. I sat in the rain for 10 minutes. The water ran down my neck. My hand shook, not from cold, from understanding, or from the beginning of understanding. I did not know what I understood yet, but I knew that the cradle was not a piece of furniture. It was a casket for a secret, and Jenna had thrown it out because she thought it was junk. That was the first irony. The second would come later. The third would break her. I took the box and the photograph inside. I dried them by the wood stove. I studied the coordinates. They were close. 10 miles, maybe 12, in the hills, near the old Holly River Road. I had driven it once as a boy with my father. He had said, "That's where the fire was." I had asked what fire. He had said, "The one we don't talk about." I had never asked again. Now I had a key. Now I had coordinates. Now I had a photograph of a woman named Sarah who was not my great-grandmother, but who shared her name. And I had a baby who was the last. The last what? The last Bennett? The last survivor? The last secret? I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the rain. Travis and Jenna were upstairs. They thought I was sleeping. They were whispering about the house, about selling it, about the developer from Charlotte who had offered $400,000 for the land, about the timber rights, about the mineral rights. Travis said, "He's stubborn, but he's old. He'll come around." Jenna said, If he doesn't, we have options. The doctor said he's confused. We could get power of attorney. I listened. I did not move. I was not angry. Anger is a young man's fuel. I am 74. I run on something older, something harder, something that does not burn. It calcifies. It becomes a shell. And inside that shell, you can hear everything. Every whisper, every plan, every betrayal. And you can wait. The next morning, the rain stopped. I told Jenna I was going fishing. I took my truck, a 1998 Ford. It still runs. I drove south on Route 9, then east on Holly River Road. The road was gravel, then dirt, then mud. I drove until the road ended at a gate, a rusted gate. Beyond it was a field, overgrown, then woods. I got out. I had a compass. I had the coordinates. I walked. The ground was soft. The air smelled of wet earth and something else. Something metallic, like old blood or old iron. I walked for 40 minutes. The trees thinned. I came to a clearing, and I stopped. It was a graveyard, but not a churchyard, not a family plot. It was a mass grave, a depression in the earth, 50 feet long, bordered by a low stone wall that had collapsed in places. At the head of the depression stood a monument, granite, weathered. The inscription was worn but readable. Holly River Mine, 1923. 47 men, 14 boys, gone to fire, gone to earth, gone to God. And below, in smaller letters, and the women, and the children, the ones who waited, the ones who wept, the ones who died of grief. I walked closer. The grass was high. There were no individual headstones, just the wall, just the monument, just the long, low mound that ran like a scar across the field. I walked the length of the wall. At the far end, I found it. A small stone, not granite, sandstone. It had fallen face down. I knelt. I lifted it. It was heavy. My back screamed. I turned it over. The inscription was faint, but clear. Sarah Bennett, age 19, and her son, age 3 months, died of smoke. 1923. I sat down. The stone was in my lap. The grass was wet. The sky was gray. I looked at the name. Sarah Bennett. Not my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother had died in 1960. In this house. In her bed. At 91. This Sarah Bennett was 19. She had a son. 3 months old. They died in the Holly River fire. In 1923. 1 year before my grandfather was born. 1 year before Elijah Bennett. My great-grandfather moved to this farm and built this house and married a woman named Sarah who carved her initials into a cradle that was already old. I understood, or I began to. I walked back to the truck. I drove to Princeton. I went to the county courthouse. I went to the archives. I asked for the records of the Holly River Mine. The clerk was a young man. He had tattoos. He did not want to help. I showed him the photograph, the woman in front of the tent. He looked at it. He said, "That's a mining camp. My great-great-grandfather worked there until the fire." I said, "I need the death records for 1923, for Sarah Bennett and her son." He looked at me. He said, "Mister, those records are in the basement. They ain't digitized. It'll take hours." I said, "I have hours." It took 4 hours. He brought me a box. Cardboard. Falling apart. Inside were ledgers. Handwritten. The ink was brown. The pages were brittle. I found it. Page 347. Sarah Bennett. Wife of Samuel Bennett. Minor. Age 19. Died of smoke inhalation. October 14th, 1923. Infant male. Unnamed. Age 3 months. Died of smoke inhalation. Same date. Same location. Holly River Mine Camp. Tent 7. And below, in a different hand, Added later, Samuel Bennett. Minor. Age 22. Died in collapse. October 15th, 1923. Body not recovered. Samuel Bennett. My great-grandfather's name was Elijah. Not Samuel, but the last name was the same. I turned the page. I found another entry. Elijah Bennett. Minor. Age 24. Survived. Burned. Treated at Princeton Hospital. Discharged November 2nd, 1923. Next of kin, none listed. I sat back. Elijah Bennett. 24. Burned. No next of kin. He had survived the fire. He had been treated. He had been discharged. And then he had gone to Mercer County. He had bought this farm. He had built this house. He had married a woman named Sarah. And he had brought with him a cradle that had belonged to Sarah. The other Sarah. The dead Sarah. The one who died in the smoke with her baby. He had saved the cradle. He had saved the key. He had saved the coordinates. And he had never told anyone why. I went to the bank. The key had a number engraved on it. 176. The bank was on Main Street. It had been there since 1910. I walked in. I asked for the safety deposit vault. I showed the key. The manager was a woman named Gloria. She was 60. She had worked there for 30 years. She looked at the key. She looked at me. She said, "Mr. Bennett, this key is from the old vault, the one we don't use anymore. The boxes were transferred in 1980, but some of the old ones, they got lost in the paperwork." I said, "Can you try?" She tried. She went downstairs. She was gone 20 minutes. She came back with a metal box. Small, green, covered in dust. She said, "Box 176. No name on the lease. Just a date. 1924. I took it to a private room. I opened it. Inside was a deed for the farm on Route 9, dated 1924. Purchased by Elijah Bennett for $1,200. Cash. The seller was the Holly River Mining Company. And there was a letter, handwritten, in pencil. The paper was thin as Bible pages. I unfolded it carefully. It read, "To whoever finds this, my name is Elijah Bennett. I was a miner at Holly River. I survived the fire. My brother Samuel did not. His wife, Sarah, died in our tent. Their baby died in her arms. I was burned. I was alone. I took the cradle. I took their savings. $1,200. It was all they had. I bought this land. I built this house. I married a good woman. I gave her Sarah's name. I gave her Sarah's cradle. I meant to tell the truth. But the years passed. The children came. The lie became a life. And now I am dying. I cannot undo what I have done, but I can hide the truth where it will be found. The land is mine by law, but it is theirs by blood. The fire took 47 men, 14 boys, and 2 innocents. I have lived on their grave. I have eaten from their table. I have slept in their bed. If you're reading this, you're my blood, and you're their blood, because there is no difference. A man is not made by who fathered him. He is made by who raised him and who he raises. Do not sell this land. Do not give it away. It is not ours to sell. It is ours to keep. The key is for the lock. The lock is for the door. The door is for the house. And the house is for the memory. Elijah Bennett, 1947. I sat in the private room for 1 hour. I did not cry. And if it is unregistered, the land cannot be sold without a full archaeological and environmental survey. That would take years and cost a fortune. I said, "I don't want to sell it." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to build a fence and a gate and a sign. I want the grave to have a name, and I want the house to have a purpose." It took 6 weeks. Arthur filed the paperwork. He registered the mass grave with the State Historical Society. He filed a conservation easement on the 40 acres that bordered the grave. He established the Holly River Memorial Trust. I donated the land around the grave to the trust. I retained a farmhouse and 5 acres. But the farmhouse was now encumbered. It could not be sold. It could not be mortgaged. It could not be developed. The timber rights were frozen. The mineral rights were placed in trust. The house could only be transferred to a direct descendant who agreed to maintain the memorial and live on the property for at least 6 months of each year. If no descendant agreed, the house would revert to the trust and become a caretaker's residence. I did not tell Travis and Jenna until the papers were signed. I invited them to dinner. I cooked pork chops, mashed potatoes, May's recipe. We sat at the table. I poured iced tea. I said, I have something to tell you. About the house. Jenna smiled. She thought I was going to sign it over. She had the power of attorney papers in her purse. I had seen them. I said, this house is not for sale. It is not for mortgaging. It is not for development. It is protected by law, by history, by blood that is not mine, but is mine. Travis said, Dad, what are you talking about? I told him the story. I showed them the photograph, the letter, the deed. I told them about Sarah, the real Sarah, the one who died in the smoke. I told them about Elijah, the fire, the cradle, the lie that became a life. I told them about the grave, the 47 men, the 14 boys, the women, the children. I told them that the land they wanted to sell for $400,000 was not land at all. It was a cemetery, and you do not sell cemeteries. You tend them. Jenna's face changed. It went through several colors. White, red, purple. She said, this is insane. You can't do this. We have plans. We have a buyer. We have a contract. I said, you have nothing. You threw out the cradle. You threw out the truth. And the truth, once found, cannot be thrown out again. She stood up. She knocked over her chair. She said, we'll fight this. We'll get a lawyer. We'll prove you're incompetent. I said, you are welcome to try, but the trust is irrevocable. The easement is permanent, and the grave is registered. You cannot unring a bell, Jenna. You cannot unburn a fire. You cannot bury the dead twice. Travis did not speak. He looked at the photograph of Sarah, the woman in front of the tent, the baby in her arms. He looked at me. He said, Dad, is this true? I said, it is true that Elijah was not my blood. It is true that he took his brother's name. It is true that he built this house on grief and guilt and love. But it is also true that he raised my grandfather, that my grandfather raised my father, that my father raised me, that I raised you. Blood is one thing, Travis, but a cradle is another. A cradle holds what you put in it, and Elijah put his whole life into that cradle. He put his shame, his hope, his promise, and he passed it down to me, to you, to your children, if you want it. But you have to want it, not for money, for memory. Travis looked at Jenna. She was crying, not from sadness, from rage, from the loss of something she had counted on. A house, a sale, a future in Charlotte. She said, I won't live in a graveyard. I won't raise my children in a museum. Travis said, Jenna, it's my family's home. She said, it's a trap. He's trapped us. I said, no, I have trapped the house. You're free to leave. The door is open. It has always been open. But the house stays, and the grave stays, and the cradle stays. And if you stay for them, not for you. That is the condition. That is the price. That is the lock. They left the next morning. Travis called me 3 weeks later. He said he was filing for divorce. He said Jenna had gone back to Fairfax. He said he was moving to Charleston. He had a job at a lumber yard. He said, Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I said, you didn't know because you didn't ask. The cradle was in the attic. The story was in the wood. You just had to look. He said, "Can I come home?" I said, "This is not my home, Travis. It is Elijah's. It is Samuel's. It is Sarah's. And it is yours. If you want to keep it, not sell it. Keep it." He said, "I want to keep it." I said, "Then come. The door is open." He came back in June. He brought his children, my grandchildren, Lily, age 9, and Jacob, age 6. They had never seen the farm. They had never climbed the oak. They had never walked in the woods. I took them to the grave. I showed them the monument. I told them the story. Not the whole story, not yet, but the beginning, the fire, the men, the boys, the woman who held her baby, the man who survived, the cradle that held 6 generations, the key that opened a lock, the lock that opened a truth, and the truth that opened a heart. I am Harold Bennett. I am 74 years old. I live in a house that is not mine by blood, but is mine by fire. I tend a grave that holds 47 men, 14 boys, 1 woman, and 1 child. I sleep in a room where my wife died. I rock in a chair that my father made. I look at a view that my mother showed me when I was 1 hour old. And I know now what she meant. The house is not the inheritance. The land is not the inheritance. The money is not the inheritance. The inheritance is the story. And the story is this: we are not who we were born to be. We are who we choose to become. Elijah chose to be a Bennett. He chose to carry the cradle. He chose to build a house on ash and raise a family in it. He chose to hide the truth until the truth could be born. And I choose to bear it. I choose to tend the grave. I choose to keep the house. I choose to pass the cradle to Lily and Jacob, not as a piece of furniture, but as a promise that the dead are not forgotten, that the fire does not end the story, that the ash becomes the soil, and the soil becomes the oak, and the oak becomes the cradle, and the cradle becomes the home, and the home becomes the world, and the world becomes the memory, and the memory becomes the love, and the love becomes the reason, and the reason becomes the life, and the life becomes the legacy, and the legacy becomes the name. Bennett, just Bennett, because we never needed more than a name.